Bankai. As iconic, recognizable, and loved that word is, Bankai is one of the most well thought out and fleshed out abilities in all of manga. The Zanpakuto power system is deeply woven into the fabric of the narrative of the story of Bleach. It's not just a power system, it's a character writing system, with each Zanpakuto being the literal imprinted soul of its wielder on a weapon. Bleach is a story about identity and fighting peace with that identity, grappling with themes of love, loyalty, honor, fear, and many others. Shikai and Bankai are the first and last releases of Zanpakuto, and they are also the steps of self-actualization these characters go through. Bleach is a story rich in symbolism, wordplay, and secrets, and it's a story that does not like shoving every minor fact in your face. Kubo is an insanely talented artist and visual storyteller. This man starts his stories and ideas by just sketching what comes to his mind and then thinking about how to tie it into the stories he writes. The entirety of Bleach was born from a random drawing of Rukya with a scythe. Instead of planning and outlining the traditional way, yet somehow connects and fleshes out his worlds and characters in a very unique and rich way. So it's only natural for the story to be full of visual symbolism and references that may help us understand these characters just a little more. Add to that the insane levels of wordplay and secrets hidden within the names of characters and their Shikai and Bankais. Let's overanalyze every Bankai in the series and dive into a world of souls and swords. This was originally one giant video, but I ended up splitting it into two parts, so stay tuned for the second one. Consider supporting the work I do here on Patreon and access extra content by helping me make more and better videos.
Bankai Kamishini no Yari.
Ichimaru Gin's Bankai Kamishini no Yari translates to divine spear or deity killing spear. It has the ability to extend to an extraordinary length, 13 kilometers at hypersonic speeds, making it the fastest Zanpakuto in the Soul Society. Its retraction speed is even greater, creating a vacuum wave to slice opponents, allowing it to bend or fragment unpredictably. And within the blade, after it segments, is a hidden poison. The true secret of the Bankai lies in Buto Renjin, a technique where the blade dissolves into dust upon retraction, releasing a deadly neurotoxin that destroys cells on contact, which was Gin's ultimate gambit against Aizen. Gin concealed his Bankai's poison for decades, pretending loyalty to Aizen. His plan was to exploit Aizen's momentary vulnerability post-transcendence, showcasing his patience and cunningness, all to kill Aizen for revenge. Aizen caused harm to Gin's childhood friend and the woman he is in love with. Even as a kid, he started his plot to take him down. Gin became a Shinigami just to get closer to Aizen and pretend to be loyal to him for most of his life, doing unforgivable things, all to gain Aizen's trust and eventually catch him off guard, hiding both his true nature and his true intention, a snake waiting for the perfect strike. The name Kamishini no Yari, deity killing spear, obviously evokes themes of deicide, akin to mythical weapons like the Norse mistletoe arrow that killed Balder. In Bleach, this reflects Gin's goal to destroy Aizen, a self-proclaimed deity. But obviously, we also got the serpent imagery and symbolism. The Bankai's extension mirrors a snake's strike, while the poison parallels its venomous fangs. Gin's demeanor, smiling, calculating, and treacherous, allies with serpentine associations of deceit, like in the biblical serpent and Orochi in Japanese myth. In fact, the name Ichimaru is derived from Orochi. But I also see metaphors of shedding skin. The segmented blade may symbolize a snake molting, but even Gin's hidden identity and transformation, from a loyal captain to a traitor, one loyal to Aizen, just for him to twist again to reveal his true vengeful intentions for the sake of love and protection. Ichimaru Gin lived his role as a venomous and patient Shinigami. His Bankai's poison is his buried rage and resolve for revenge, even at the cost of his life. The tragedy lies in his failure despite meticulous planning, as Aizen's Hogyoku simply transcended mortal limits. His Bankai is his identity. It represents Gin's long-con patience and desire to reach an untouchable foe. His poison is his dual nature, outwardly benign yet inwardly lethal. Maybe the goal was simply too far out of his reach, no matter how great that reach was, and no matter how long he had waited for it. Kamishini no Yari is more than a weapon. It encapsulates Gin's whole essence, deceptive, patient, and tragically heroic in a sense. And most tragic of all, even more than the sad life he lived badly, even sadder than the time wasted for essentially nothing since he failed, is his regrets. His love for Matsumoto, which drove him to protect her, only abandoned her and left her alone. It made her shed tears after all, the suffering and confusion he caused her. In his dying breath, Gin thinks about whether he is worth the tears that dropped for him and the love she held on so tightly, even though he left her. Gin looks at the mirror and asks himself if he was in Matsumoto's place, whether he would still continue to love, even after seeing him turn into a monster for her sake. His poem goes,
君が明日蛇となり人を食らい始めるとして人を食らったその口で僕を愛すと終えたとして僕は果たして今日と同じように君を愛すと言えるだろうか。挽回大グレン氷林丸
Hitsugaya Toshiro's Bankai is Daigren Hyorimaru. His Zanpakuto Hyorimaru means ice ring, and add Daigren to that and we get Great Crimson Lotus Ice Ring. Hyorimaru embodies East Asian dragon lore, where dragons govern water, weather, and cosmic balance. Just like Hitsugaya's abilities, he controls weather and water in different levels and in multiple ways. Hyorimaru's ice dragon evokes deities like Ryujin, the Japanese sea dragon, and Long Wang, the Chinese dragon king, who rules over the seas and is associated with water and weather. Hitsugaya, as a character, is cold and is mostly indifferent. He himself represents the qualities of ice, strong and resilient, but also capable of breaking and melting. In fact, the shattering of ice is not just built into his story and life, but also his power itself. Even his name is deeply rooted in ice and cold imagery. Hitsugaya, when broken down, translates to Sun Turn Valley, but the kanji used for turn refers to the sun setting, and with the wordplay of sun already being in the name, it reads something like Sunset Valley. The geographical implications of a place called Sunset Valley is of a place where the sun sets past the hilltops, and meaning night, and thus the cold comes sooner. Basically, his name is telling us he's from a cold place, which has obvious associations with his overall themes. Toshiro breaks down to To, which means lion, most likely a reference to his hair, but also a symbol of a king, like his draconic power and his insane potential of becoming the next head of the Serete and the king of cold hell. Shiro just means white, but also refers to winter and ice, so his name essentially means White Lion Boy from Sunset Valley. And we only need to inspect his short backstory to get where this comes from. As a kid, which he still is, Toshiro used to always dream of a cold and barren valley, where he finally meets his Zanpakuto spirit. He hears the voice talking to him. In fact, he is one of the few who meet their spirit before having it imprinted on an Asauchi, so before he even gets a sword. Hitsugaya lives with his grandmother and childhood friend Hinamori, but when his grandmother grows weaker and Momo becomes a Shinigami, time passes and everything changes around him, except himself. He does not even grow in size. He suffers from and is annoyed by his stagnation. Like the cold weather, he remains the same, often dreaming of a voice in the cold. When it turns out that he has been making his grandmother sick because he's just too cold at night. And after meeting his future Lieutenant Matsumoto and being convinced, he finally decides to become a Shinigami, to control his power and not to hurt others, but rather protect them. Quickly rising in rank and becoming the third seat in Squad 10, he then becomes the captain after Ishin leaves Soul Society. Everything from then until the end of the story is about Hitsugaya shattering and building himself back up. The shattering in itself is also a function of his Bankai because of the time limit he has. Daiguren Hyorimaru manifests as wings and a tail of ice, later a full dragon. It grants him flight and amplifies Hitsugaya's control over water and ice. He generates massive ice constructs, blizzards, and dragons, but he has a time limit. Initially, his Bankai lasts only briefly due to his young and incomplete mastery. After intense training, after Aizen is dealt with, Hitsugaya achieves complete mastery, removing the time limit and enhancing his power. The four petal-like ice formations that float behind him at first represent the time limit and his Bankai breaking after it ends. It turns out that Toshiro's Bankai is far from being at its peak power yet. So much that Toshiro has to transform into his adult self that he has not reached yet to meet his Bankai's true strength, a strength we have still yet to see in full. That's when the lotus imagery and visuals strike with its symbolism. The lotus in Buddhism and Hinduism signifies spiritual awakening, rising from murky waters. Hitsugaya's Bankai name alone reflects his potential to transcend his muddy childhood trauma. Lotuses close at night and reopen at dawn. Similarly, Hitsugaya's power dies because of the time limit and is reborn upon activation, or his matured Bankai, which mirrors his growth and change. We can even link this to the true meaning of his name, the Sunset Valley and the coming of the night, followed by the rising of the sun. The four flowers might also symbolize kalpas, aeons in Buddhist cosmology, cyclical periods of creation and destruction. Everything about his Bankai, from elemental nature, strength, and abilities, connects to shattering and being built up again. Hitsugaya's character and Bankai draw a lot of inspiration from the sixth layer of Buddhist hell, the Naraka. The Naraka are a part of Buddhist cosmology, usually equated to hell or purgatory, but isn't about punishment so much as penance. The 16 rings are divided into 8 cold and 8 hot, and those who die having lived sinful lives must live out lives in rings of penance until they die and move on to the next ones, eventually being reborn into the realm of the living. The deepest of the 8 called Naraka is Mahapadma, described as Great Red Lotus, Hell. So, Ice Ring, aka Hyoryumaru Toshiro's Bankai, describes the Naraka itself. Also, the Great Red Lotus epithet comes from the fact that in the deepest cold Naraka, sinners are exposed to such cold temperatures that their skin and organs crack and splinter, and their bloody insides create the likeness of crimson lotus petals. People who are sent there are due to a lack of enlightenment and insight of the world. But the moon is a symbol of truth and enlightenment, which brings me to the most clear problem with Hitsugaya's Bankai, and that's its contradictory nature. From the etymology, the name features both the sun, the winter, and implications of the moon. Toshiro's differences always caused him isolation, mainly his hair and eye color. While his genius and difference reflects beauty and strength, his perception of it was of something bad, and he saw himself as the problem. The loneliness in his life is the only stagnant thing in it, the cold isolation of his nature and his power. His personality is described by others as cold, but he can get very emotional. Kubo illustrated him as a blazing glacier in the fight against Aizen. His rage leads to his defeat in a moment where his coldness could have served him more. The nature of Naraka itself sounds contradictory on the surface, because how can hell be cold? His vice captain is one of the laziest officers in Soul Society, and she says he is a workaholic. Another contradiction in the duo, yet they work very well together. Hitsugaya's white hair, icy power, and draconic Bankai position him as a winter dragon, king of time and space, a guardian of natural order, a captain of the Gote 13, a hard-working prodigy. His is the strongest ice-type Zanpakuto in Soul Society, contrasting Yamamoto's Bankai, the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto. And this parallel runs deeper than just elemental opposition, but also the king of hell symbolism, since Yamamoto is clearly the Yama of this world, the ultimate judge and wielder of the hottest Bankai. Toshiro's hell layer is that of the cold. Yamamoto is the oldest captain, and Hitsugaya is the youngest to ever become a captain. In fact, the two are very similar in terms of being the two most serious captains, and the story does often hint at Toshiro's potential of becoming the future head captain of the Seirete, like how the current head, Kyoraku, said that Hitsugaya can and will surpass him in 100 years, which in Soul Reaper's time is very short. Hitsugaya is a prodigy, but his Bankai's instability reflects his psychological limits, the fear of failure, the pressure to protect others, and trauma from his isolation and grandmother's sickness. His power grows only when he confronts those fears. His paradoxical life of ice makes it hard to grasp and confront. Ice embodies fragility and permanence. Hitsugaya's Bankai can shatter easily, yet it can achieve eternal stasis. This duality mirrors his struggle to reconcile his youthful vulnerability as a kid with his duty as a Soul Reaper captain. Hitsugaya's Bankai's evolution mirrors Hitsugaya's journey from a fragile genius to a leader willing to sacrifice everything. The lotus in its name isn't just aesthetic, it signifies his path towards enlightenment through icy resolve, where power and peril are eternally intertwined. Renji's Bankai is very interesting, since for most of the story it is a fake and untrue one. Hihyo Zabimaru is a false name given to him by his Zanpakuto spirit because it hasn't recognized him as a warrior yet. Renji has two spirits, a baboon and a snake. In Shinto and Buddhist lore, baboons, Saru, are guardians against evil. For example, in the Koshin faith, the baboon king Hihyo evokes Saru Gongen, a divine monkey protector. Meanwhile, the serpent, Zabimaru, symbolizes rebirth, the shedding of skin and hidden wisdom. That very shedding of skin metaphor I discussed when talking about Gin affects Renji as well, maybe even more. And in contrast to Gin embracing his serpentine aspect, Renji ignored it, and therefore his spirit cunningly held its true power and its name. Hihyo and Zabimaru represents balance, primal strength from the baboon and cunning adaptability from the serpent. And this of course reflects Renji's life growth and very soul. Renji was a poor kid from the Rokongai that had to rise through sheer hard work to where he is now. He was separated from his childhood friend Rukya by nobility and had to make his way up to her. Renji's inferiority and jealousy of the Kuchiki clan, and especially Byakuya, is strengthened by the fact they even stole Rukya from him. His arc is about accepting his duality and finding his true self, the duality of humility and loyalty, one he almost lost when he became arrogant after becoming a lieutenant. Renji wants to overcome Byakuya as his captain and as a form of idol. He wants to reach and surpass. His insecurity blinded him when he confused his duty as a soul reaper who follows orders with protecting his closest friend and future wife. It's through trial and error, wins and losses, that Renji pieces himself back together. Like Hitsugaya shattering and rebuilding, and his contradictions and paradoxes, Renji's passion leads him to confront both Ichigo and Byakuya. He follows both duty and love, yet he fails at both. But each of them marks an important character change. He finds his true passion when confronting the equally stubborn Ichigo and accepts that his love for Rukya is much more important than his duty as a Shinigami. So he admits his shamelessness and asks Ichigo to save her. He then goes on to confront his idol and fights. The first time he uses his Bankai after just acquiring it. He loses, of course, the difference is just that big. And as he is bloodied and beaten on the ground, Renji still finds courage and strength to reach out to Byakuya, who just quoted a story of a monkey trying to reach the moon but only sees the reflection on water, and how that Renji's fangs will never reach him, only for Renji to muster the last bit of strength he has and prove him wrong. Renji's duality runs deep through etymology and mythology, and even in lore poetic narrative. When the baboon with fangs fights for his love and duty. In this battle, Renji finds himself, but he loses shards of his Zanpakuto, and from there it is never complete. This is on top of being a false name from the start. Its very weakness is that these segments are fragile at their joints, making it vulnerable to precise attacks. And so is Renji's resolve, fragile in parts but tough in others. In the 1000-year Blood War, Renji fights alongside his captain in a losing battle. Renji is ordered not to use his Bankai so it doesn't get stolen, and that conflicts with his desire to just go all out to protect his captain, where he fails again. It's in his training with Ichigo with Squad Zero that he finally learns about his spirit hiding its name, and his true Bankai is revealed to him. Of course, he had to fight Tenasauchi to be able to forge a new Zanpakuto, and so his new Bankai is achieved.
Bankai. So, Zabimaru.
The name shifts from Hihyo, referring to the baboon king, to So Zabimaru, now two kings. He calls both of his spirit souls, and so Renji fights with his duality. Zabimaru's initial fragility symbolized Renji's fractured self-image. He saw himself as inferior to Byakuya and Ichigo, but now he fights alongside them, the man he both adored and hated and the man that brought him closer to his love. His Bankai shattered because he forced power without understanding its soul. The reforged Bankai embodies Sokotsu, the sweeping bones, a Buddhist term for purifying one's past. Renji embraced his flaws to awaken his true strength. Renji's Bankai is a rebellion against Soul Society's class hierarchy, proving greatness isn't born but forged. It's a double-edged soul for one man to wield. Renji's Bankai journey is the anti-Ichigo of the story. Where Ichigo's power is innate, Renji's is earned through failure. Where Zangetsu is a mirror to Ichigo, Zabimaru is a teacher, forcing Renji to confront his weakness. So Zabimaru isn't just a weapon, it's a declaration that true power blooms when you accept every fractured piece of yourself. A baboon's roar and a serpent's hiss. Battle cries of a soul that refused to break, reforged in the fires of both humility and loyalty.
Bankai. Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi.
Kuchiki Byakuya is the first major antagonist of the series, and a very special one. The captain of the 6th Division, the pride of and the current head of the Kuchiki clan, one of the major families of Soul Society. He is the definition of superiority, and that sadly puts him in a very tricky situation mentally and psychologically. See, Byakuya, as law-enforcing and formal he is since his birth, has broken the rules of nobility not once but twice. First, he married the woman he loved, even though she was a commoner, unfit for nobility. Everyone was against his decision, but he followed through with it. And when that woman died, her last wish, her last request for him to honor her was to adopt the sister she abandoned and protect her. And so, once again, the head of the Kuchiki finds himself breaking the rules. After this, Byakuya vows to never break them again in front of his parents' graves. Bleach, and especially in Soul Society arc, is all about honor and pride and what they mean to people. From Renji's climb towards the moon, the Gotei captain each grappling with loyalty and duty, and the rebellious Ichigo invading to save his friend. And above all, there is Byakuya, who had to grapple with both his vow to his parents and his vow to his dead wife. Love is the death of duty, and so the Kuchiki head closed himself and wore the mask of nobility through and through. And this isolation at the top only caused him to not value people, including those closest to him. In fear of losing something, he lost another that's more valuable. Byakuya's Shikai, Senbon Zakura, 1,000 cherry blossoms, make his blade fragment into thousands of tiny petal-like blades that he can control telekinetically. His Bankai, Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi, vibrant display of 1,000 cherry blossoms. Like others, reflects his character's transformation. Cherry blossoms in themselves embody Mono no Aware, the poignant beauty of transience. In samurai culture, cherry blossoms symbolize a warrior's readiness to die at their peak. Its final form, Shukei Hakuteiken, White Imperial Sword, condenses every petal into a single blinding white sword of pure energy. It grants Byakuya ethereal wings and unparalleled speed and power. White Imperial Sword might hint at Shinto ritual purity through the color white, and the imperialism of its White Imperial Sword kind of evokes Japan's sacred regalia, Sanshu no Jingi, particularly the sword, Kusanagi no Tsurugi. Byakuya becomes a sword emperor, judging with divine and superior authority. Because that was essentially his role in Soul Society. He sends Renji to jail after failing to beat Ichigo without orders. He sentences Rukya and Ichigo to death after the execution is interrupted. He follows orders and upholds the rules, but every rule he upholds and every judgment he declares only shatters like a petal from his own soul as it distances him from what truly matters. You will hear me use the shattering metaphor a lot because it's just so apparent and present in the story to not notice, from Renji, Hitsugaya, and now the most shattered Bankai of them all. A sword breaks down, marking its death, and so does a soul. Scatter Senbon Zakura. Byakuya's Bankai was originally a cage. His rigid adherence to Kuchiki rules suffocated his true self. He married Hisana, a commoner against tradition. He adopted Rukya, another commoner, out of duty, not love. Until that had to change because of Renji and Ichigo. This story transforms Byakuya's pride into his love and merges them as it goes on, fusing the detached petals and finding peace with them. Acknowledging Renji's admiration and challenge, learning to respect Ichigo, and finally being able to confront Rukya with his true feelings and being able to look at her as a part of him, his clan, his cherry blossoms, and his pride. Even as he learns to fuse duty and love and understanding his true pride, that's when the story shatters it all again.
人の生きる上で最も重大なその感覚の名は恐怖だ。
私は戦いの中で恐怖を受け入れ、それを叩き伏せて進む力を手にしてきたのだ。恐怖など。
All the fears Byakuya grapples with throughout his arc come crashing down on him like his 1,000 blades crush people. Literally, since those very 1,000 blades turn on him because of his opponent's power. He is robbed his pride, whether that means his duty as a captain failing in battle, failing to win against his foe, failing to avenge his dead comrades, failing to protect those he loved the most, and ultimately defeated by his own power. Tragic and sad that the proudest character that saw Ichigo using Bankai as an insult to his clan and his race as a Shinigami begs that very Ichigo for help, when even after accepting and respecting him, he still told him once that his duty is to protect Karakura and that Soul Society does not need him. He, the pride of the Kuchiki, asks in what was almost his last words.
最後に頼み事をする私のおぞましき無様を許してくれ。頼む。ソウルソサエティを守ってくれ。黒崎一護。
A broken blade has no value unless it is reforged, and 1,000 petals scattering can hope to fuse together once again. Only strength can uphold duty, and only strength can match pride. Physical, mental, and emotional strength. And so, that last petal finds its place. When his Shikai grows so much it resembles his old Bankai, when revenge and emotions don't get the best of him when confronting As-Not again, and rather believes in Rukya and commands her strength and expresses his true emotion, those of trust and pride. Kuchiki Byakuya in his last battle sends Renji and Rukya away, telling them that they are not needed and should rather go help Ichigo. I find this the perfect final nail of his character's journey. As noticed by Hitsugaya, sending them away is both an order from a captain confident in his and his allies' strength, but also an acknowledgement of Rukya and Renji's close friendship with Ichigo. And lastly, the highest level of respect, the once human that stole power, now a strong ally to help and ask for help from. His ultimate technique, Ikka Senjinka, captures the fusion and diffusion of his blade. The concentrated strength, his self-destructive move, reflects how he chose Rukya's safety over the clan's honor. But even beyond that, he made Rukya's safety the clan's honor, finally solidifying her as a part of the very clan, so he fused love and pride, and he even called Rukya his pride, the pride to protect. Ikka Senjinka means flower-scattering crimson princess. We can say that Byakuya is the scattered flower, and Rukya is the Crimson Princess. His Bankai's beauty isn't just aesthetic, it's the manifestation of a soul that learned to bleed, yet still cuts with a grace of falling cherry blossoms beneath a moonlit sky.
Bankai. Hakka no togame.
Rukya's zanpakuto is Sode no Shirayuki, sleeved white snow. It's an ice-type zanpakuto known for its beauty and elegance. Just like her brothers, it's beauty and elegance that hides death. Her Bankai, Hakka no Togame, white hail punishment, is a manifestation of absolute zero, where Rukya's entire body and surroundings plummet to minus 458 Fahrenheit or minus 273 Celsius, halting all molecular motion into a freezing stop. Visually, she dons a pure white layered kimono and headdress resembling ice crystals and funeral garb. Her hair turns white and eyes glacial purple. Anything within her vicinity freezes instantly, crumbling to dust. She maintains this state for 4 seconds. Exceeding it risks her own life. And she creates a blizzard dome where cold seeks targets. Like I mentioned in Byakuya's section, in Shinto, white/shiro symbolizes sacred cleansing worn by priests and corpses, a tradition we see in various other places like funerals in Islam and in various Eastern cultures like in China and India. The color of mourning is white because it symbolizes the paleness of death. Rukya's Bankai kimono looks a lot like Kyokatabira, a death shroud. The name of the Bankai starts with Hakka, which means white hail. It evokes kami purification corruption linked to myths like Konohana Sakuya Hime, deity of volcanoes, which is the opposite of Rukya's power, yet she is also associated with cherry blossoms, and her name features the Hime part, which means princess. Rukya is all about the moon. Her Bankai reflects the moon's sterile, lifeless perfection. If we look at her first technique, first dance, Tsukishiro, lunar surface, or white moon, we can look for a tie in Shintoism and find Tsukuyomi no Mikoto, who is the moon deity of order and cold. More Japanese mythology like Yuki Onna can be a possible inspiration and or a reference by the Bankai. Yuki Onna is a spirit of frozen beauty and sorrow. Rukya's Bankai is a paradox of life in death. It doesn't just freeze, it preserves. Her ice encases foes in moments of perfect stillness, a twisted mercy denying decay, which kind of mirrors her trauma. Rukya freezes when she is under stress, when she grappled with whether to help Ichigo or let him have his revenge, fighting a Grand Fisher, the hollow that killed his mother, and reclaim his pride by himself. She struggles with dealing with the urge to protect and help when she should believe and allow people to risk their lives for solace in victory or defeat. She remembers her captain's words that there are 2 types of battle, one for life and one for pride, something he told her when she had to witness her vice captain, Kain Shiba, die trying to avenge his wife, fighting alone for her and his honor, a wife Rukya used to adore, and a senior she wants to be safe, all for him to die by her sword at the end, which will continue to haunt her for a long portion of the story. Ichigo doesn't just look like Kain because they come from the same noble bloodline, that of the Shiba family, but they also have similar personalities, and they both play the role of a catalyst in Rukya's life and growth. The 2 people that lift her from depressing isolation and self-despise. Rukya freezes again when confronted by Espada number 9, Aro Niro, who uses Kain's body, memories, and personality to lure in Rukya and trick her. The once again pride is relevant when it comes to Bleach and Bankais. Rukya suffers from a lack of self-worth. Oftentimes, she sees herself as someone not worthy of saving or shedding blood for. She intentionally tries not to get emotionally attached to people, even though she ends up doing so naturally. She was abandoned as an infant by her older sister, who ended up regretting it and spent 5 years looking for her until she died trying, but made Byakuya vow to bring her into the clan, which only caused more isolation as she got separated from Renji, the last of her childhood friends still alive, and had to endure the ruthless environment of nobility as a commoner, and from the worst part of Rokongai as well. Kayen's death and her mission in Karakura, which leads to her meeting Ichigo and losing her power, all for her to be abandoned again in a cold and empty cell awaiting her execution. But even after she accepts her death and worthlessness, others don't. Her captain, her friends, and allies all risk everything to save her. Ichigo ends up saving Rukya, and events lead to her execution being called off after it appears that someone, I don't know who exactly, has been playing with the strings behind the scene all the time. When everything goes back to normal for Rukya, her confidence starts to grow and gets back to normal. She helps Orihime when it's her turn to feel worthless and weak. She even goes to Huecomundo to save her because she knows how harsh and cold isolation can be. Rukya defeats Aroniro and Espada without her Bankai, which I still consider the most impressive win for a Shinigami in Huecomundo. Byakuya comes to rescue her and calls her his pride. Rukya comes to accept Kain's death and her role as a Shinigami. She helps Ichigo, again regaining his power in a moment parallel to the very scene that started the whole story. Rukya doesn't just start Ichigo's story as a Shinigami, she helps it continue in his lowest moments possible. Rukya is always there. Rukya finds warmth in the coldness of her life and peace as well, until...
怖い。僕は寂しい。寂しい。寂しい。
なんだ貴様は。
僕の千本桜はどこ？君を殺せばここへ来るかな。
When fighting the man who crushed the pride of her older brother and almost killed him, Rukya doesn't seem to be affected by the power of fear he holds. Since that only works on living beings, and since she can drop her temperature to 0, her body is essentially lifeless as it has the properties of a corpse. She fights well and goes the furthest anyone went against as not, until he is able to reach her fears through not touch but eyesight, which surrounds her and pushes her to the edge. Remember when I said as not crushed Byakuya's pride? That wasn't his most important pride because Rukya is. So the head of the Kuchiki rescues his sister and complements her strength. He helps her regain her confidence and calms her down, which leads to her activating her Bankai, one that showed true fear to fear itself. A woman who feared connection wields a power that touches to destroy, but learned to make that touch as icy and lethal, or as warm and gentle as she pleases and needs. An ice princess that turned her sorrow into strength.
Bankai. 鈴虫追式閻魔航路
Kaname Tosen is the man that was driven by justice so far into darkness he was not able to see anymore. Sure, he was born blind, but even in darkness he found light. Tosen had a very close friend. He liked her a lot. She used to describe the sky and stars for him. Even as dark as night can get, there were still flickers of light from afar, light that can still get blocked by the clouds in the sky. Tosen's friend got married to a Shinigami, and she became a Shinigami herself to help others and bring more justice to the world. She was a star in his darkness, and she was killed by her new husband. Tosen demanded justice for her death. He started to despise Soul Reapers and Soul Society, but found no justice, so he decided to wield it himself, with her sword in his hand and one path in his sight. He joined the Soul Reapers and rose in rank to the seat of captain. Tosen is all about justice and honor in that justice. He hates fighting for no purpose and anything that disturbs order. He clashes with Zaraki Kenpachi, who he sees as a chaotic monster that ruins peace. He confronts and demands restriction from Grimmjow after he invades the human world with his followers when he was not ordered by Aizen. Tosen is conflicted in his own sense of justice, since, well, he betrays the Soul Society and is one of the 3 major defector captains, joining Aizen's side and plans. In fact, it's revealed he has been a loyal subordinate of Aizen for the longest. He betrays the trust of his closest friend and fellow captain Kumamura, who shared a similar view on justice, and his right-hand man and Lieutenant Hisagi, who felt betrayed. Is Tosen a hypocrite, or is he just blind to his own view? His shikai is Suzumushi, which means bell cricket. It can emit a high-frequency pulse that overwhelms the senses of all in range except himself. His Bankai, Suzumushi Tsushiki and Makorogi, is the first ever domain expansion, creating a 50-meter dome of absolute darkness. It causes sense deprivation inside the dome, complete darkness in sight, deafening silence, nullified Ryatsu sensing, even smell and taste are erased. Only touch remains. Tosen can freely move and attack, but opponents are disoriented. Its only weakness is that if Tosen's Zanpakuto is touched, the senses go back. Tosen's Bankai isn't just sensory deprivation, it reflects his worldview. The path of least bloodshed is shrouded in darkness. It's as if Tosen rejects light, the visible justice, and is hypocritically embracing moral absolutism in shadow. The Suzumushi symbolizes loneliness, mourning, and rebirth in Japanese poetry. Loneliness and mourning are important to Tosen's arc, but even rebirth, since he undergoes holification and changes form a few times, each time losing his sense of justice and path. His Bankai, Suzumushi Tsushiki and Makorogi, reads like Clear Bug final form Death King Cricket. The name evokes Enma, the King of Hell and Supreme Judge, a name a lot of Shinigami relate to since, well, they're Soul Reapers, but Tosen especially, with all of the justice and judgment, symbolism and imagery. Grillar Grillo, his hollow form, reads Insane Bonds Cricket. The bonds here can mean literal bondage like shackles, chains, and cuffs, and we see chains dangling from him in this form, but it can also refer to non-physical bonds like familial ties or the binding of people in a relationship. Tosen, in this specific fight, is cutting all of his bonds to his closest people. It might also be a reference to La Cigarra, a fable about a cricket singing futilely before winter. The one battle we see his Bankai utilized is against the Kenpachi himself, who Tosen clashes ideals with in relation to honor and duty, but also their nature. He projects his own justice and his own darkness on Zaraki. He forces his worldview on Zaraki, the physical blindness, and his justice. It's often said that justice is blind, and so is the case here. Tosen's hatred for Soul Society is born from the fact they turned a blind eye to his friend's death, since they didn't punish her murderer, her husband. And even now, his metaphorical blindness is greater than his physical one, since, well, Tosen gains vision, but only after complete deprivation. He undergoes holification, tainting his soul and his morals, and when he starts to finally see, he is blind. He insults the people closest to him and aims to kill them, while ignoring the fact that they are trying to stop him and show him the way. Tosen is defeated by an attack from Hisagi, who says that even in his blind form, he would have sensed this attack. But Tosen lost his senses, even though he just gained sight. To execute justice, he corrupted himself. Tosen was driven too far by his hatred and revenge. Just as Gin failed and died with his eyes open, the same eyes that spent most of the story closed. Realizing his regret and his failure, Tosen finally saw the truth, and before he died, he wanted to see his lieutenant. However, to most people, this action by Aizen seems just heartless and selfish. However, there's so much more to Aizen killing Tosen in this specific moment than just badass arrogant villain stops Guy from becoming good and having a good ending. And this is the only time I will be referencing the Bleach novels in this video, since I know most people have not read them. But when it comes to Tosen's case, there is some great insight to be gained upon consulting the extra information we gain from them. First is that Tosen's friend's husband that killed her is revealed to be Tsunayashiro Tokinada, the main antagonist of the novel and a major figure in Soul Society's history. He put the blame on someone else and easily went unpunished. Tsunayashiro is one of the major clans of Soul Society, which just amplifies Tosen's grudge on the system by adding nobility and power to the equation. But it is also revealed that Aizen actually respected Tosen in some way, which is very rare. He admired his resolve and vision. While of course he made use of his hatred to help him, he did not manipulate him like so many others he used. Another parallel between Gin and Tosen is that they were not manipulated by Aizen, but rather actually were loyal to him for most of the story, on the surface at least when it comes to Gin, but also Aizen's capability of trust and understanding of others. We are told that Tosen was the one that actually told Aizen to kill him in case he lost his way and sense of justice, which he does. But also, Aizen's view is that Tosen will only suffer from despair if he is healed by Unohana or Orihime, and he is forced to live with Shinigami and Soul Society, which he hates and rejects. Even as Tosen turned mad and blind and cut all his ties, the last one cut was the thread of life and what tied him to a comrade and person he respected. From a judge in darkness to a monster in the open, to a man defeated by the only people that saw good in him and killed to avoid more suffering. His Bankai summoned a void where justice went to die. In the end, Tosen may have judged himself harshest of all.
Bankai!
Kumamura's name is made up from the words Koma, which comes from Komainu, which are the lion dog statues used in Shinto shrines, and Mura, which means village. A simple name that might hint at the existence of a settlement of wolf people, which we end up being told about in the lore of Bleach. His first name, Sajin, means left battle position, which again is a play on the Komainu, hinting at him being the left position stone dog of the pair. Which makes it interesting because it does hint at there being a right side one, an Ujin as opposed to Sajin. I guess an appropriate theory would be that it's Tosen, because the two share a lot of similarities and differences that make them clash. Their views as Shinigami, their philosophies as beings, and their lives as comrades and commanders turned enemies. Kumamura is a werewolf who used to be ashamed of his looks and spent most of his time hiding himself, who was looked down on and ridiculed and lived as an outcast. He got accepted for who he was by two people, Tosen, who is blind and could not see him anyways, and Yamamoto, who saved him and invited him to become a Shinigami. Those two people got Kumamura's full loyalty and respect. Kumamura admires and looks up to Yamamoto, and he proudly shows that. His Shikai, Tenken, means divine retribution or divine punishment, which adds context to his Bankai's name, Kokujo Tengen Myo-o. Kokujo is black rope, and it's a reference to Kala Sutra, a level of Buddhist hell. It is so named as the monstrous torturers brand their charges with burning iron ropes and then cut them along said branded lines. Myo-o reads like Myo, wisdom, and O, king. It refers to the so-named figures in Buddhist mythos. They are wrathful and often monstrous divine beings that punish those who would deviate from the path. Hence the name of the Shikai, divine punishment. It does sound like Kumamura punishing Tosen from deviating from the path. Another great dynamic with Tosen is that Tosen's Bankai, Suzumushi Tsuishiki Enma Korogi, refers to Enma, so Tosen is the judge and Kumamura is the executioner. Yet the two ended up disagreeing about their own interpretation of justice. There is so much nuance written in this specific relationship, and from each character's point of view we get a whole other story. So let's move on to Kumamura's life after Tosen's death and the next major event and reveal that we get. After losing his Bankai in battle, the man he owes his life to and respects is killed. Kumamura undergoes the most major change in his life. Funnily enough, Tosen and Yamamoto, two people Kumamura respects, two people he loses, are also intertwined lore-wise. Enma from Tosen's Bankai name is the very same Yama I have been mentioning throughout this video and will continue to mention, the very Yama that inspired Yamamoto. Kumamura visits his grandfather and asks him to teach him their clan's secret technique. On the one hand, the Elder's cave entrance is marked by a torii gate with shied paper words. Like the stone dogs, they are all associated with Shinto shrines. I also like the fact that Tetsuzaimon stands outside and trains when Kumamura goes in to the gates. Maybe Tetsuzaimon is that second dog, as Kumamura's most loyal man and a future captain. The Elder talks about how the Wolf clan is punished by their appearances for the crimes they committed, and he refers to Chikuso, which refers to beast or animal, suggesting that the Wolf clan were at one point souls in hell who came back as subhumans, almost as kind of parole, not prisoners anymore, but also not free to live with the full dignity of humans. In Buddhism, there are 6 realms, one of which is called the animal realm. Maybe that's where the village of wolves that Kumamura's name hints at exists. Or maybe it's a distinct realm in itself, like Wakamundo, Soul Society, and Hell. The Elder says they live in the shadow and that who rules Soul Society doesn't matter to them. I will make a separate video analyzing and discussing the lore and world building of Bleach, because as you see, there's just so much. This video is about Bankais alone, and it's mostly restricted to Soul Society lore and Zanpakuto specifically. Kumamura ends up having to choose whether to sacrifice his heart and gain immense power, especially turning undead for some time to exact revenge on his enemies and punish them for their deeds.
Bankai. Kokujo Tengen Myo. Dangai Shoe.
Kumamura becomes invincible and defeats Sternritter Bambieta. He saves Hinamori and heads to kill Yuhabaha before he runs out of time. Except he runs out of time before he arrives at his enemy. As the Elder tells us, the Wolf clan are vengeful and they were punished for that. Kumamura may appear as if he threw away his origins, but he simply embraced them actually. In his last thoughts before turning into a wolf, he remembers his last words to Tosen. not to lose himself and die for it, which he ironically ended up doing himself. Tosen was blind, but only more blinded when he gained sight. Kumamura was a beast on the outside and became human, not for longing for it, but rather for revenge, and only did so before death. He tore out his own heart, traded it for a hollow victory. Tosen's hollowification rings a bell now, one he reprimanded him for. Just like Tosen was blinded by hatred, Kumamura traded his life for vengeance.
Bankai! Jakho Raikouben!
Soi Fon is interesting. She is the captain of the second squad of the Gote 13, as well as the leader of the Onmitsukido, the stealth force, which are now tied and united because of her after Yoroichi left Soul Society and left everything in shambles. Soi Fon is charismatic, outspoken, and a very opinionated and stubborn person. She is exactly what a cold-hearted and disciplined master assassin would be like. Since she was a kid, Soi Fon has been a soldier. She's from a lesser noble family under the Shuhyoin family, and as a little girl, barely aware of anything, she had been told to dedicate her entire life to the woman in front of her, Yoroichi Shihyoin, the 23rd head of the Shuhyoin family, one of the major 4 families of Soul Society. And Soi Fon did exactly that. She admired Yoroichi for her strength, for her beauty. She followed in her footsteps, and she was ready to die for her 10 times. Beyond loyalty and admiration, Soi Fon idolized Yoroichi and wanted to be by her side and reach her level. As expected of a child bred and raised for a role like this, Soi Fon is insanely disciplined and works very hard, essentially all for Yoroichi's sake and trust. Until that trust was betrayed. The betrayal here on the surface comes across as the simple crime that Yoroichi committed, helping Urahara, who Soi Fon always hated and never trusted. Unlike her, he comes out as a lazy and incompetent and a bad person to be next to Yoroichi. On paper, Yoroichi is the enemy of Soul Society, so she is the enemy of Soi Fon. Except that is not everything. Just like her Bankai, there are 2 very different sides of the blade. Soi Fon's Shikai, Suzume Bashi, means hornet. It transforms her Zanpakuto into a stinger on her middle finger, one that marks targets with a crest of death, and if she can hit them again on the same spot, they immediately die. Very fitting of a master assassin like her, because of its subtlety and alignment with stealth and speed combat. In Japanese folklore, hornets represent focused vengeance, which rings a lot of bells when I think about the very fight that we see this Shikai in, against the very Yoroichi that Soi Fon once admired beyond anything, now an invading enemy in her eyes, the former captain of the 2nd Division versus the current one. Soi Fon believes she surpassed Yoroichi. She trained so hard on her skills. She achieved Bankai in the time that passed since the betrayal. She overwhelms Yoroichi, showcases skills, speed, and even overwhelming control of the stealth force. Nothing beyond Yoroichi, of course, because even when it looked like Soi Fon had the upper hand and was going to use a new technique she believes she developed, Yoroichi finally shows her just how strong she still is, showing her that the very technique she thought she created was already achieved by her as well, and already named by her on top of that. Unlike Soi Fon, who went all out and believed she was overwhelming Yoroichi to show her how much she grew stronger and more confident, how much she changed and became independent from her and did not care anymore, Yoroichi still saw Soi Fon as her student and only took the fight seriously to stop her from using Shunko, because it's very dangerous that not even Yoroichi herself can control it yet. Soi Fon also shatters more than once throughout her life, and does so at the end of this very fight. All of that strong front she puts on collapses to reveal the young girl that still felt betrayed by the person she looked up to and dedicated her life for. Soi Fon wasn't angry at Yoroichi because she committed a crime and is the enemy. She was angry because she left without her. She felt abandoned and left behind.
なぜ私を連れて行ってくださらなかったのですか?
Soi Fon's Bankai is Yakuho Rai Koben, Sovereign Cannon Flash B. It's a colossal missile launcher worn on her right arm. It fires a block-level missile. If anything, her Bankai reflects her short-tempered, bombastic, and explosive nature. However, it contradicts her position as a stealth assassin. Her Shikai complemented it very well, but not her Bankai. She says she doesn't like it herself and never wants to use it unless she is really pushed to do it. While Bankai manifests as the individual's very soul, spirit, I refuse to believe there is not more to Soi Fon's Bankai than just it reflecting her personality. I see her Bankai, which she developed after Yoroichi left, as the point of distinction between her and Yoroichi. The moment she was able to branch outside of Yoroichi's shadow to become her own character and not just a cheap imitation. She spent her entire life following and imitating Yoroichi, but never reached her. She took her spot, she fought like her, she even unknowingly came up with a technique Yoroichi already made, the Hornet's Vendetta. She wanted to prove herself, she wanted to be seen. Soi Fon is loud and explosive, and her Bankai is a goddamn missile. Unlike Yoroichi, who was able to master stealth without brute force, Soi Fon's Bankai is actually an evolution of assassination. I mean, stealth is linked to assassination because of the classical archetype of sneaking into someone's bedroom and stabbing them to death. The very word assassin comes from the Hashashin, who were masters of that very act. But that's not how assassinations are done in the modern era, is it? What is the most common way to dispose of high-priority enemy individuals? Yes, there are snipers and other ways, other subtle ways, but many times these days, there is simply a drone strike or other form of explosive ordnance or bomb delivered to take the target out efficiently and quickly. No need to be subtle or hidden. That's what Soi Fon's Bankai feels to me. An evolution of assassination, a modern one. And I believe Kubo saw it this way as well. It's a Bankai she refuses to accept for the longest, until the Bankai is taken away from her, only for her to finally accept it at the end. She even accepts Omaida's help. Her lieutenant, who she always pushed away and told him his help is unnecessary. She even regained her power by taking the Bankai hollowification pill made by Kisuke Urahara, the individual she hates the most. She embraced her soul and became her own, with her strengths and weaknesses all being a part of her. Madarame Ikkaku is the definition of Squad 11's reputation. He lives and dies for battle. He is the purest form of raw battle-hungry Shinigami, just behind his captain, the Kenpachi of Zaraki. Ikkaku had met and fought Zaraki in his past, and it's because Zaraki did not kill him because he believes death is the end of battle and is not necessary. He spares Ikkaku in order to grow and maybe challenge him again. To Kenpachi, killing his foes is unnecessary, so Ikkaku is spared his life. Whether he takes that to heart and joins the 11th squad as appreciation for Zaraki, or for admiration, or to challenge him, is hard to tell because it feels like all of these are the same reason for him. Ikkaku is insanely skilled at using his Zanpakuto. He is by far one of Soul Society's greatest warriors, but Ikkaku self-sabotages and holds back that potential, and this very act is reflected by his blade. Ikkaku has achieved Bankai for a very long time, way before the story even starts, but he keeps it hidden from Soul Society, even from his own captain. His reasoning is simple. If his Bankai was to be known, he will be considered a candidate for becoming a captain, and he will have to leave Squad 11. Ikkaku wants nothing but to die under Zaraki. He shoves duty to the side, he shoves his own potential to the side for the sake of his loyalty and twisted sense of pride in his squad and captain. Renji himself came to Ikkaku and asked him to train him because he's just that good. Back when Renji was in Squad 11, that very Renji comes to Ikkaku and asks him why he does not step up and become a captain when Tosen, Gin and Aizen leave. It's very fascinating that Renji of all people does this, not Yumichika, not any other. First, because he is one of the very few that know about Ikkaku's Bankai, but Renji himself at this point has a Bankai too. Sure, not true or complete, but he does not know that yet. He respects his former teacher and he truly knows his strength, even though he keeps it hidden. There are forbidden Bankai, there are characters so strong they don't need to use their Bankai, but a Bankai kept secret by its user, this is one of the only cases, and it's a very sad one at that. Ikkaku uses his Zanpakuto in a very unique way. He dual wields his blade and his sheath, which brilliantly transitions into his Shikai when he slams them together to fuse them into a spear. He is very skilled in multiple fighting styles and uses weapons creatively and uniquely, proven further by the fact the spear itself segments into 3 parts connected by change, which gives him even more flexibility and utility. And this creative Shikai beautifully transitions into his Bankai to end the evolution. It takes the form of 3 oversized weapons connected by chains, resembling a Chinese monk's spade, a Guan Dao, and an axe-like blade with a dragon crest in the middle. The crest on the central blade fills with a crimson dye as Ikkaku's spiritual power increases during battle, especially when exchanging blows with his opponent or when he spins the weapon using this central blade. The Bankai's power is not immediately at its peak. It grows stronger as the fight progresses and the crest fills. But this can also lead to the weapon's edge becoming brittle under extreme stress. Even though he only used his Bankai once in the entire manga, even though he was pushed to his very limits and only when no one was around to see it that he finally used it. After activation, Ikkaku's Bankai is not even at its full strength from the start. It's as if the Bankai itself suppresses its power as well, just like Ikkaku does, and needs to be pushed to using it. He only uses it in his fight against Edra de Leones and never again. What I like about Ikkaku's Bankai more than anything is the reveal moment. It's very unexpected at this point for him to have one. But so far in the story, every Bankai we've seen was a showcase of power from mostly captains that whip them out effortlessly. Only Ichigo's was revealed after a lot of blood was spilled, and there's a reason that's one of the most iconic moments in all of anime. But Ikkaku's is even more. It kind of feels like it established the way the most iconic Bankais are revealed in the story later on. The last resort possible and characters pushed to the limit. Ikkaku's voice actor Nobuyuki Hiyama is the cherry on top of it all. He also voiced Viral and Hiei, so a legend. In his fight against Pao, Ikkaku refused to use his Bankai because there were a lot of people around and he would have been made known if he did. So he lost the fight, which cost the Shinigamis a lot since he failed to protect his assigned pillar. Kira, Hisagi, and Yumichika all won their battles, but the one who would be expected to win the first and easiest lost. Ikkaku is stronger than them all, only he does not use that strength properly. Tetsuzaimon reprimands him and tells him his personal pride in his wish to keep it secret is not more important than his duty. Tetsuzaimon is right, and Ikkaku knows that, but even still he never uses his Bankai again. And I can't help but respect that. Ikkaku is just too stubborn and too proud. That fire of the 11th runs deep in his blood like that crimson meter of his Bankai. The Bankai has a lot of Chinese imagery and symbolism, from the dragon design to the weapon itself. The name Hozuki refers to a plant also known as the Chinese lantern plant, a species called Physalis alkekengi. The plant also hides a secret, a very toxic poison, even though it's edible. Ryumon can mean dragon gate or dragon reputation. Ikkaku's Bankai becomes fragile as it gathers strength, and so does he. In fact, the Bankai was damaged too much that it became incomplete, just like Renji's. It's as if he engineered his Bankai's fragility to stay weak, for loyalty to Zaraki and fear of purpose, a purpose that robs him of his purpose. The only people that know of Ikkaku's Bankai, as far as I know, are Renji, Yumichika, his closest ally and partner, Tetsuzaimon, and his captain Kumamura, who heard them talking about it, and Mayuri, of course, who ended up telling Ichigo by mistake. Ryumon Hozukimaru isn't weak, it's willingly crippled. Ikkaku embodies the soldier who chooses loyalty over growth, trading potential for brotherhood. His Bankai's fractures mirror his soul, fierce yet flawed and forever unfinished. In the end, Ikkaku's greatest battle was against his own reflection, and he sheathed his blade without striking.
Bankai. Minazuki.
Unohana Retsu, or Unohana Yachiru, is another great example of duality, and in more ways than just having those two names. One of Bleach's most thematically profound revelations, a horrifying culmination of her dual identity as the first Kenpachi and Soul Society's maternal healer, a demonic captain's life, death, and the bloody rebirth of the title of Kenpachi. Unohana, for the entire story of Bleach, appears as a gentle healer and the captain of the 4th squad, dedicated and specialized in exactly that, healing. They are the opposite of Squad 11's warrior-centric creed. She is wise and very formal and very gentle. She believes in healing everyone wounded, whether ally or enemy. In Soul Society, Unohana is the only one that has a slight suspicion about Aizen's fake death. Even though Kyoka Sugetsu is completely hypnotic, Unohana's instincts and perception were sharp. Unohana continues to heal and help in the very few appearances she has in the story. Her name, Unohana, means early morning flower. However, Retsu can mean violent or furious, which is odd, and it's a part of the very subtle foreshadowing Kubo does, from comedic intense presence to serious and cold eyes from time to time. She is the second oldest captain after Yamamoto, and is a part of the very first lineup of captains in Soul Society. In Hueco Mundo, Unohana's healing and wisdom continues to affect her surroundings. Her solid beliefs in duty and her pacifism in her actions. She heals allies and enemies and guides Ichigo to the world of the living to help with Aizen. Her deep perception and experience finds Ichigo's role in that war, and she explains it to him. She lets him know his exact strength and advantage to beat Aizen's. He is the only one who has not seen Kyoka Sugetsu and cannot be hypnotized. Unohana heals and heals and heals. However, there are wounds that not even she can heal. Byakuya's wounds are outside her limits and capabilities. Only her teacher can take care of them. But not just those wounds and scars, but others that run deeper and older than any flesh ones. Unohana is the first ever Kenpachi, previously known as the most diabolical criminal in Soul Society's history, the founder of the very 11th division. Her other name, her true name, Yachiru, the master of 8,000 styles. She was bloodthirsty and craved battle like nothing else. She became so bored because of immense strength and her new role that no one was able to satisfy her blade anymore. A huge pile of disappointment shows that only for a stray demon to climb on her pile of disappointments and clash blades with her on a rainy night. Zaraki is strong enough to challenge her. He even gives her this signature scar that still itches to this day. Another scar she cannot heal. Unohana recognizes his potential and his love for fighting. She allows him to defeat her and effectively gives him the title of Kenpachi. She then intentionally limits herself and becomes the captain of the 4th Division. She saw Zaraki as a worthy successor of the title Kenpachi. However, in that fight, young Kenpachi started to psychologically hold himself back. A habit formed in the subconscious of Zaraki to withhold his strength. At first because he did not want to kill Unohana, because just like her finding joy in the thrill from battling a worthy opponent, he did not want it to end and thus started to hold his strength within. This would only get worse as Zaraki adapted the habit of nerfing himself because he's just that strong. He covers one of his eyes, though it's completely healthy and normal, but he also does so with an eye patch that devours his cursed energy all the time. Bells on his head so his enemies can detect him and make the job easier for them. He only ever uses one hand to hold his sword, because if he uses the other, there is not going to be much of a battle. Unohana relinquishes the title of Kenpachi for him, but she indirectly made him weaker, and she views that as her ultimate sin. One just like the scar he gave her was never able to heal. Her Shikai, Minazuki, transforms into a large green manta ray that utilizes its stomach acid for healing. Unohana became a healer primarily to extend her battles. Initially, she learned healing arts to recover from injuries sustained during fights, allowing her to continue battling without fear of permanent damage. Her motivation stemmed from her love of combat and the desire to prolong the thrill of fighting. Her Bankai shares the same name as her Shikai, Minazuki. Another side of her duality is embedded in her very blade, a blade that healed an unfathomable amount of people throughout her thousands years of existence, yet has probably killed much more. Minazuki is read the same, but written with different kanji. For her Shikai, it reads flesh drop gorge, but for her Bankai, it means everything depletes or all things end. Her Shikai transforms her sword into a viscous dark red blood-like substance that can be used to attack and extend her reach. It allows her to manipulate blood and heal herself and others. The Bankai creates a field of blood, and its acid-like properties can be used to dissolve opponents. Unohana's Bankai is a manifestation of her bloodthirsty nature and desire for battle, allowing her to fight relentlessly, dissolving and forcing a battle of endless revival and death. Her Shikai and Bankai share the same name, yet they assume different roles, healer versus killer. Her Shikai swallows pain and her Bankai drowns in agony. Manta Ray, an ocean guardian, versus a blood sea, an ocean of death. Over time, Unohana settled into the role of the healer. Did she consider it retribution for her past life? Healing to avoid suffering and death instead of killing? There was a limit on her mask because when the time finally comes and she is needed, not as the 4th Division captain, not as Retsu, but as Yachiru, the first Kenpachi. Unohana was loyal to Yamamoto and respected him. She respected his last order for her squad not to be deployed in the first battle to minimize the damage they receive in order to be able to help out at their full strength after the fight ends. Her older teacher tells her that healing is not what she should focus on now, and the new captain commander asks her and assigns the training of Zaraki to her. Zaraki is Soul Society's strongest warrior and one of the most important assets, and in dire need, his strongest form is needed. The man who does not even know the name of his blade, indirectly, somehow because of her. So she accepts her final role. Unohana has to fight Kenpachi to unshackle his mental restraint and reach his full potential. In the infinite space of the Muken, the 8th and deepest level of the central great underground prison of Soul Society, hundreds if not more than 1,000 years later, after her restraint from battle and his restraint from full strength, an end to a literal endless battle where death is but a stage, a final dance of sinful souls and blood. What would a fight like that look like? Minazuki means all things end. It signifies the end of her self-restraint, the end of Kenpachi's mental shackles, the end of her life as Retsu, the healer, the end of her life as Yachiru, the Kenpachi. That's 10 Bankai. We got 12 more to cover in part 2, so subscribe to not miss it. Join my Discord server linked down below, and consider giving some Reiatsu to my channel by supporting it on Patreon. I would really appreciate you and love you for eternity. Like I love my Patreon supporters who help make this easier and possible with their supports. See you in the next one.